All right. Yeah. So as I previously said, I get to write down things that you said during the interview that would make a good title. I've got a couple of them.
All right.
Just pick your favorite and we'll use that for this episode. So this is a great place to set a story. Down the internet rabbit hole. two paragraphs before the detective. That gets into us. Hopping up on cloud nine, or kind of shocking.
Oh, geez. Kind of shocking would be a good one, but it may be false advertising. I'm not really all that shocking. Oh gosh, which ones did you guys like best?
I like 2 paragraphs before the detective. I think that said a lot.
That does say a lot, doesn't it? Yeah, let's go with that one. I like that one.
All right. Welcome to season 6, episode 37. 2 paragraphs before the detective. This is Written on the Edge. I'm Ben Sebastian here with my co-host, S.A. Baz Collins, and we're really glad you're here with us.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
All right. Our guest is Garrett Hutson. Garrett writes upmarket mysteries and historical spy fiction, driven by characters who are moving and unforgettable. He lives in Indianapolis with his husband, 4 adorable dogs, 2 oddball cats, and more fish than you can count. You can usually find him reading about history and daydreaming about being there. This is where his stories are born, and he hopes they transport you the way his imagination transports him. Garrett, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
And thanks for bringing the dog pound with us.
Yeah, I know. Just, especially when you want them to be well behaved, that's exactly when they're not.
They're all Mr. DeMille.
Mm-hmm. Do they ever make cameos?
No. Fortunately, I'm in a basement and they can't come downstairs.
So nice.
Yeah, the cat may, but no, the dogs won't.
All right, fair enough.
The cat's going to come in about halfway through and go, yeah, I'm tired of all that shit.
Yeah, no.
So how did you become a writer? Where was the spark?
Oh, gosh. Always, since before I can remember. Even back when I was really little, I used to entertain my older cousins and just tell them stories and all that kind of stuff. And then I got some validation from teachers when I was in school, and I won a few ribbons on some contests. And that really told me that, this is something I could actually do. Nice. I could write stories, and like an author is something you can really be. And so from that point on, I always wanted to be one.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So you have a book out. It came out August 16th, right?
That's right. Yes.
And it's book 3 in the series. So let's introduce the series, and then we'll talk about the book itself.
Okay, the series is called the Death in Shanghai series. It's a series of historical murder mysteries that are set in Shanghai in the mid-1930s. And I picked Shanghai specifically because it was a really, really interesting place with a very diverse community. Some of that, unfortunately, is because Western nations had taken advantage of China, including Japan as well. And a lot of those countries then had concessions in major cities like Shanghai. But then the upside was we had a really diverse community in Shanghai, a lot of stuff going on there. There was a vibrant jazz scene, great business. It was actually probably one of the only places in the world that wasn't suffering from the Depression. So everybody wanted to be in Shanghai. So I thought this is a great place to set a story. And then when I was reading more about the corruption that existed there and how the head of the main opium tracking gang was also the anti-dope commissioner for the Chinese government, which basically allowed him to get rid of all his competition. I thought, boy, I could set a murder mystery there, and that would be a great place for one. And so I did, and it worked out really well. And now I've got 3 of them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So do you have to read them sequentially, or do they kind of stand alone?
They are sequential. Now, they're standalone in terms of each mystery is its own self-contained thing, so you don't have to read them in order, but there's a definite character arc with the characters. They do develop and change over the course of the series, so it is helpful if you like that, like I do, to follow characters, then it's helpful to start from book one and move on. Book one is called The Jade Dragon. It's set in 1935, and then Assassin's Hood is book two, set the following year. And then the new one, it's called No Accidental Death, is set in 1937 when the Japanese were invading. And so that's kind of the backdrop of a murder there. An American seaman is found killed right on the edge of a battle zone where he's not supposed to be. But then the autopsy shows that the weapon that killed him was not a Chinese or a Japanese military gun. So his was not an accidental death, hence the title.
Right. Very fun. So, okay, who are the characters we're following?
Okay, so the main character is Doug Bainbridge. He is actually an analyst with the Office of Naval Intelligence, which is kind of a little bit of a tie-in to my other series, which is about spies. But this is really more murder mystery type stories. But he's sent to Shanghai on an immersion because he's got some Chinese language background. So the Office of Naval Intelligence sends him there to get completely immersed in Chinese language and culture. And while he's there, he runs into a friend from San Francisco who's a reporter. His name is Tim McIntyre. And they go out to a club called the Jade Dragon, where I get the title for the first book. Right. And then Tim never comes back from intermission. Doug finds him dead in an alley, and the police kind of dismiss it. Exactly. Yeah. The police kind of dismiss it as a robbery. But based on their conversations, Doug knows it wasn't a robbery. And so when he's going to clean out Tim's apartment for his parents, he finds some things there that lead him down the rabbit hole of murder investigation. So he gets drug into that way.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And you had prefaced this by saying there's a lot of diversity.
Yes.
Gay characters, and they're fully part of the setting?
Yes, there are gay characters. Doug identifies as straight. He is an unreliable narrator, but he does identify as straight. And I would say he's probably mostly straight, but not really.
He's been known to stray. The lines are blurred.
The lines are a little blurred, yeah. And I hint at that some in each of the novel, and hint a little bit more at each subsequent novel. So by the time you get to the third one, No Accidental Death, there's some pretty strong indications there. But his next door neighbors are a gay couple, an older British man and a younger Chinese man, hence some of that diversity there. As well as Tim's best friend turns out to be a middle-aged gay reporter as well, Jonesy, who's actually one of my favorite characters. He's this very gruff, very direct person, but he's really kind of a softie on the inside.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Those were fun. And great name, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
All right. So
I have a quick question. So how did you deal with, my daughter went to film school in Shanghai as an exchange program. And one of the things they ran into, because they had other Chinese students who were also in Shanghai, but not necessarily from that city. And one of the things they ran into that was really complicated, even for the Chinese students, was the fact that there is a dialect spoken there that has it's almost like the Finnish language in Scandinavia is so different from Sweden and Norway, and they have Shanghaiese. And she got in a situation where there were cops and stuff, and she turns to her Chinese friend and said, "What are they saying?" She goes, "I have no idea." So I just wondered, did you deal with that dynamic as well? Because the Chinese language is not, so cut and dry in Shanghai.
No, it's not, definitely. And I do touch on that a lot in the Jade Dragon and less in some of the subsequent books. Doug comes to China already speaking Mandarin and Cantonese. And of course, in Shanghai, it's neither.
Exactly. They're the Finland of China.
Right. And so it does get into that. They have Pidgin, which was this kind of,
bastardized.
Exactly. And Doug refuses to speak Pidgin, so it causes him some issues at the beginning. But he does, especially by the subsequent books, he can speak Shanghainese and get by pretty well.
Excellent.
So... give us the blurb on No Accidental Death, and let's try to talk about it without spoiling it.
Oh, sure. Yeah. It is a murder mystery, so I can't tell you what happened.
Right.
But there's an American seaman named Nick Bonadio who is assigned to this ship that Doug is assigned to as an intelligence analyst. And he is a party boy, let's say. But he's also very determined and gets his way an awful round. As I said, shot, killed on the edge of a battle zone where the Japanese and the Chinese are fighting in North Shanghai. And Doug, being assigned to the ship, gets assigned to solve the murder for the Navy.
Nice. Is this his first official assigned murder? Because it sounds like the first one was not.
The first one was not, no, and the second one was not either. This one is official. Yeah.
Nice.
It becomes difficult after a while to have people just keep stumbling across dead bodies, like, you know, Jessica Fletcher.
I was saying Murder She Wrote.
Right, yeah. And I never wanted the series to become that, so I did find a way for Doug to have an official role in this, and it worked out really well.
Nice. Did it allow you to give him a lot more resources to play with as well?
It did, but I also had, with the battle being a backdrop, because he's an intelligence officer, he has things he has to do with that as well. So he's also a little bit distracted as well. Complications, yes.
Nice. All right. I don't want to spoil it, but I want to ask a little bit more, because, all right, let's take the tack I can ask. You said that you've hinted at blurring his relationship lines.
Yes.
Where did you take it in this one?
So there is a group of sailors on his ship that enjoy one another's company. And I just applied normal ratios here. It's a ship of 300 men. And if you consider gay men are about 4% of the male population, well, that's a dozen men right there.
And there are also a lot of straight
servicemen
who, that's not necessarily a given that their straight label will apply.
Yes. And bi is a real thing as well. But I didn't get into that as much.
Absolutely.
I focused more on, there was this group of sailors that, as I said, enjoyed one another's company. And that actually plays a certain role in the mystery. There's a possibility that Nick Bonadio might have been blackmailing somebody who may have wanted to off him for that reason. You know, I'm not going to say whether they did or didn't, but it does tie in.
All right.
I feel like I should be playing some kind of intrigue soap opera organ music behind this, you know.
Nice.
I'll have to find it.
Did you...
Those dissonant chords.
Yeah, right.
All right. Anything else you want to share about the book?
Oh, boy. Without getting into spoiler territory, this one, the first two books in the series are told almost entirely from Doug's point of view. This one, I strayed from that a little bit. I had a need where it was almost like Doug needed to be in two places at once, and I obviously couldn't have that happen. So I actually told some scenes from Jonesy's point of view and from Lucy's point of view. Lucy's Doug's girlfriend.
Okay.
She's another one of those really fun characters as well. She's very modern. She drinks, she smokes, she swears. You know, she does all the stuff that would irritate her mother. And I told some scenes from her point of view as well.
Of it. For queer folk.
Yes, the Sharon Glass of 1937 Shanghai.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, so that was a lot of fun. So I think
cool.
Anyone who's followed the series from the beginning will probably really enjoy those scenes.
Nice. All right. So dipping into the work behind the work, how do you research historical Shanghai?
Well, there was actually a lot more material out there than you might have thought. I initially got the idea because I was just reading a contemporary news article about some American jazz musicians that were going there and performing at some of the old 1930s jazz clubs. And I thought that was really interesting. And that just kind of led me down an internet rabbit hole. I found a 1934 American guidebook to Shanghai. That was pure gold. And it was almost entirely complete too. I think there were a couple of chapters in the middle that were missing, but it provided just amazing details, like the cost of everything, like, you know, the cost of a cup of tea or whatever. So I could actually be authentic in that kind of stuff. And it also gave an interesting insight into the way Americans thought, you know, somewhat problematic, but that's also useful. You know?
That's historical.
Exactly. And then I found, in addition to that, I found a memoir that had been written by a British police officer who had served on the Shanghai police force from 1929 to 1936. And likewise, some problematic attitudes in that, but it definitely gave me some insights on law enforcement in Shanghai at the time. Just a lot of really good stuff. It was, there was a lot more out there than I expected there to be.
That's really handy, actually.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's probably because Shanghai, even back then, was a bit more on the capitalist side than, you know, than you had. I mean, even though, you know, the last emperor had already occurred and, you know, and that kind of thing. But I just think it's interesting that, you know, Shanghai was the Hong Kong of that part of China. You know what I mean? It had
Yeah.
access to international trade. It had access to, so it was as it is today. It's still a major port city for China.
Yes.
You know, so I can definitely see that's excellent ground for an author to explore because it has that foreign element. You know, as a reader, you'll be absorbing it like you would in a movie. Like, oh, that's over there. Oh, you know. So you get that ambiance, and it almost becomes a character in and of itself.
Oh, it really does. And especially in the first book, The Jade Dragon, Doug is very much a fish out of water type character. And so we do get to kind of learn along with him what it was like there. Yeah. And that was a lot of fun doing that.
Excellent.
So how I just want to, oh, sorry, Vance. I just want to hit on craft just a little bit.
Okay.
So how did you approach the mystery novel? Did you like have the solution and then work your way backwards, or was this something that you had to map out forwards to reach your resolution? And was it the resolution that you thought was going to happen, or did the characters alter it partway through?
The characters altered a lot partway through, but as far as who actually did it, no, I did plan that out. And, you know, it's so funny because I'm really not a big planner when it comes to writing novels. I usually will plot out a page to a page and a half before I start writing. And then I let the characters just kind of take it from there. But with mysteries, particularly a murder mystery in particular, you got to have your clues. You got to have it all set out. So I do try to figure out before I start who did it and why. And then I can kind of work everything else in as I go.
Excellent. Okay. Sorry, Vance. I just wanted to get those two, you know, craft pieces out, because a lot of people always think, oh, I would like to write a mystery, but, you know, they find it so daunting, you know, because there's so many
they are
points,
hard,
you know, that are out there.
Oh, yeah. And I will say, of all the things I write, the mysteries are the most difficult.
Yeah.
Just
I bet.
To bring it all together, or
yeah, and to make sure that there's sufficient clues all through, that you're playing fair with the reader. You know, they have to have the capacity to figure out for themselves, but you don't really want them to either. So you got to do that perfect balance there. When I'm reading a mystery, I really like to figure it out about 2 paragraphs before the detective. If I can figure it out about 2 paragraphs before the detective, then that author really did their job. And so I try to do that, and I hope I do it well.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Did you want to mention your spy thrillers as well?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I have 2 series actually. I have a series called the Spycatcher series, which focuses on an American spy catcher named Martin Schuler in the late 30s and early 40s, whose work is to capture Nazi spies trying to infiltrate the United States and Argentina as well, because we kind of took over the whole Western Hemisphere and as far as keeping the Nazis out. So that's kind of a fun series I enjoy. And then I have a spin-off novel from that, which is currently a standalone. It's called Grey Paris. Which takes place in Paris at the time, the beginning of the Nazi occupation. And it focuses on an American musician named Oliver Carmichael and his very bohemian friends. They're all various shades of gay to bi, lesbian to bi too. And that, as I said, is kind of a spin-off. It shares some characters with my Spycatcher series, but it is its own standalone novel.
Are you going to do more with it?
I am. Yeah, I actually did write a sequel to it that I haven't published yet, and it's in revisions right now. So it will probably come out next year.
Very nice. All right.
Anything else? It's the most blatantly gay of all my novels.
All right. And I take it by your smile, you had fun with that.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Awesome.
I like that you're in that era of history that I love. I love that whole period of the 30s through the mid 40s, you know, right around wartime and stuff. Because, you know, you have all the glamour and stuff, and even when you're writing a spy novel and stuff, there's so much ambiance you can play with in that era, because it was so stylistic. You know, even other parts of the world, you know, the Art Deco movement made its way to various parts, you know, so you have the cultural influences, you have the style influences at the time. You know, it really makes for a wonderful tableau to create with all your characters, you know.
Oh, it does. And the Nazis make great villains. They just,
of course,
they're awesome villains, but also French collaborations as well. So I had fun exploring that. And there's an awful lot of gray area. You know, the good guys did an awful lot of really bad things, and they did it in the name of freedom. It was war. Yeah. 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 And I definitely enjoy exploring that, those kind of moral gray areas. And it's like, is this the right thing to do or not? Well, this is what I have to do.
Very fun.
Excellent.
Anything else you want to share about your works?
More to come. I'm hoping to branch out time-wise. I've got a novel I wrote that was set in the Renaissance in France that I need to dig back out at some point. It focused on the court of Henri III. Okay, you guys will like this. So when you're looking at things before the 20th century, it's often difficult to find anything specifically that tells you, okay, so and so was gay. You know, and for one thing, they didn't even have those terms, but you can read between the lines. And King Henri III of France is one of those that you can you can definitely read between the lines. He became king at the age of 25. And as soon as he did, he started surrounding himself with this gaggle of young men, like between the ages of 15 and early 20s, who were extremely fashionable, very gossipy, like vicious gossips. They had reputations. They were said to wear hats that were almost feminine, but they were extremely stylish. And then subsequently, you know, most of them were from the lower nobility, so they really should have kind of been, you know, beneath the king or whatever. But he gave them all titles. He gave these 16-year-old boys titles of duke. So I'm reading about this stuff and I'm thinking, oh, come on. I mean, it's obvious he was fooling around with them, or if he wasn't, he wanted to.
Right.
Right.
So yeah, but there's you know, all these historians who are you know, vehemently saying, oh no, he couldn't have been homosexual because he had affairs with women before he became king. Okay, so before he became king, he had affairs with women. After he became king, he surrounded himself with all these cute little boys. You know.
Yeah.
So
right.
Anyway, that was the proof is in the pudding. Yes, where there's smoke, there's fire.
Right. Right. And my point is, what goes on behind closed doors?
Mm-hmm.
You know, they aren't watched all the time.
No.
You know.
And you know, as writers, sometimes we can be flies on those walls behind those closed doors.
Well, you know, and it also, I think as writers, especially queer writers, we have to push back on historians who have time and time again. I mean, what about those that skeletons of the male and female lovers, and then they find out they both were male and they're you know, embraced, and it's like,
yep,
you know, how long
make
did
assumptions.
They push? Right, they push that narrative because it must be, you know, and yet, you know, we've been there all along. We've been in history. There's time and time again we can show it, but again, historians go, oh well, you know. It's just, man, the rationalization that some historians and archaeologists go through are just, it's amazing. It's almost like Cirque du Soleil for archaeologists, you know, all the leaps and bounds, and you know, it's just crazy. You know, and I think as queer writers, it's upon us to kind of set the record, quote unquote, straight. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And you know, fiction can sometimes do that better than nonfiction. For one thing, we have an entirely different audience, and stories just really matter more to people than facts. You know, I mean, I'm not saying that we don't put facts in our novels. Obviously, we want them to be historically accurate, but the fact that we're telling a story from people's points of view, that gets into us a little bit more than just a fact by fact narrative.
And it's also, you know, we have to realize, you know, homosexuality was coined much later in human history. They didn't have a word for it.
Right.
You know, back then, you know, it was the Victorians who, you know, got all uppity about it, and eventually a term was coined because they needed to name it. And even then, you know, Queen Victoria didn't believe women would do that to each other. So, you know, lesbians were completely ignored in laws, you know, so it's crazy. And I think as queer authors, you know, it's incumbent upon us to represent and honor those people who were back in the day, that I think that, you know, we want to see in our own community some reflection of, some indication that we've been here all along. You know?
Yeah, and whenever I read about a particular period in history, I always imagine what it would have been like to be there. And of course, if I'm imagining what it's like to be there, then I'm imagining that from the perspective of a gay man, not as a straight person.
Right.
So, you know, and that makes it easy then for me to put gay characters in particular settings, because I would imagine what that would be like for me.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Kudos to you for doing that. I love historical fiction that really takes a good, hard, queer eye look at, you know, history and says, we were there, you know.
Right. Love it.
Excellent.
All right. So you've dropped hints that you're working on new stuff. What is next on your list to do?
I am currently doing revisions for the sequel to Great Prix, which takes place the following year in Lyon, France, and also Algiers.
Ooh, nice.
So we do get back to those Bohemian French people that I enjoyed a lot. And I'm in the research stage right now for a book 4 in my Shanghai series. And I think I've got a really good idea for a mystery there, and I'm going to write that in November. I always participate in Nanowrimo every year, which Nanowrimo is National Novel Writing Month, and it's an annual challenge in November to do 50,000 words of fiction in 1 month, which is really hard, and I love it. So
you have to be diligent. Yep.
You do, yeah. And so typically what I'll do is I'll do the first 50,000 words or so, and I'll usually do another 10 to 15,000 in December. And so I can get a pretty good first draft between November and December usually, and then I'll flesh it out more later.
That's awesome.
Excellent.
Yeah. So I couldn't help but notice your T-shirt. I normally ask people if they have any final words of wisdom, but yours are free.
Oh, they are, but I can't read them upside down. Let's see. Size matters not. Oh, that's the obvious one. Let's see.
No.
Fear is the path to the dark side. There we go.
Nice.
We were just talking about being daring. So everybody be daring. Fear not.
I would just say, when you were talking about your Paris one, I just would love someone to write a story where, it has Paris in the title and it's Paris, Texas. I would love to just that title, play on words, and then maybe have the character be so strange they imagine they live in Paris, in real Paris. Just create there you go. I just think that would be hysterical to take, a very famous city, but don't do it there. Instead of Athens, do it in Athens, Georgia. Just really throw people a curveball.
I think we might
get a lot of hate mail, actually.
See, we ought to suggest this to Del Shores. He'd do a good job with that.
Yes, exactly, exactly. There you go. He probably already thought of these. Anyways, that's excellent.
All right. So that final words of wisdom came off your shirt. Be daring.
Socials?
Yes. Where's the best place for people to follow you?
You can, if you go to my website, it's www.garretthutson.com. Garrett is 2 R's and 2 T's. Hutson is Hutson. And you can get information about me there, about my books. There are links to where you can pick up the books. There's also links to send them to my newsletter. I send out a monthly newsletter just saying what I'm working on, what I've been reading. I provide book reviews there, and where to find me in the future. So that's probably the best place. But I do have Facebook and Twitter. Facebook is Garrett Hutson Author. And I'll sometimes post photos there that are kind of related, like vintage photos that are related to the books I'm writing. And on Twitter, I'm probably the least active on Twitter, but I will be out there occasionally, and it's at Garrett B. Hutson.
Nice. All right, folks, this is Written on the Edge. The Road Podcast is produced by Road Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our listen station, go to sign up as a gift. Visit www.roadpodcast.com. We'd like to extend a huge thank you to Garrett Hutson for being here.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Now, go to GarrettHutson.com. Pick up No Accidental Death, or the first book in the series, and sit back and enjoy the mystery read. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.